guys, welcome back to the Passion Podcast, Hipp Season 4. Today I'm with my good friend Ale. Ale, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is Alejandro Aguirre, but as Laura says, nobody calls me that. You could just call me Ale. I am a poet here in Gainesville, and I'll be starting my master's or my MFA in poetry at Boston University come September. So I'm excited for that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So we met by doing T Literary and Arts magazine. If you guys watched the interview with Ian, they're good friends. We all, met doing that. This past year, he was actually the president of T. So do you want to talk at first about how you got into T?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, T was probably the most exciting and fruitful part of my undergraduate experience. It started when I was a freshman, and my dad is also a UF grad.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. He graduated sometime in the early 90s, maybe, with his undergrad. Totally different career path. He studied engineering.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's very different.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah.
Never gonna be me.
Yeah.
But one of the things that not that he regretted about his career in undergrad, but he always wanted, or would have wanted for himself, for somebody to tell him, you need to join more clubs.
Yeah.
And so he told me, in order for me to put food on your plate, basically, you gotta join 4 clubs this semester.
Yeah.
I forget what 4 I joined. I think I started doing salsa. Yeah. Which,
Were you good?
I'm decent. I'm not. I'm good enough to know that I'm not good.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You understand? Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. I also joined a club for Colombian Heritage and I think something else, but the one that really stuck was T.
Yeah.
I remember going into Matherly Hall and seeing a flat. You know how they have those big boards?
Yes.
Yeah, in Matherly when you walk in.
Mm-hmm.
It was I was doing my first workshop. I think it was in fiction because I still wanted to write fiction back then. And I saw a flyer and I applied. At the time, they were really small. And trying. I mean, they had been around for a long time, but it was just one of those. The literary magazines have ups and downs, and it was one of those moments. But they brought me in, and it was great because it was a small, tight-knit community.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I stuck around, I think.
That's awesome. When was the first moment in your life where you realized you wanted to go into literary arts, or maybe not even go into it as a career, but just pursue it as like a hobby or a passion?
Yeah. Well, I want to be able to say that it's something that I always knew I wanted to do. But up until I was like 13, I was living in fantasy land thinking I could play in the NBA. And so
wait, no way.
Yeah. I didn't even make the high school
basketball?
Yeah, basketball. I didn't even make the high school basketball team. And here I was thinking that I can go pro. I'm 5'8", 5'9", it wasn't gonna happen for me.
That's so funny.
But I always enjoyed reading. It was something that I think one of my cousins, who basically tutored me over one summer when I was a kid, really introduced me to and made me fall in love with the concept of reading, escaping into another world. And then I realized when I was in high school, because of some prompt that I think one of my teachers at the time gave me, it was like a poetry writing exercise. Or maybe it was a fiction piece. I had a class on habitology,
What's that?
Weird class. It was a class on Lord of the Rings. Now I'm not.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, that's cool. They have that here?
No, at my high school.
At your high school.
At my high school. It was obviously that's not the name of the course on the syllabus.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, on the transcript, because then UF would have thought, what is he doing studying habitology?
Yeah.
But it was a class just reading the books and watching the movies.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was one of the first times well, actually, no, I might have to scratch that. It was one of the first times that I felt like it could be something that I wanted to do long term.
Yeah.
There were times in middle school where, and I have to credit my English teacher back then. Her name was Mrs. Valderrama Elsie.
Shout out.
Yes, shout out. She had assigned some poetry writing prompts, so I guess that was the first time that I wrote poetry. But I think it was because of the habitology class, and especially because of some other teachers that I had who were very influential on me in high school, that I realized I wanted to write. Not necessarily poetry, but that came later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the first, so like your first like book that you really like, we were talking on another episode of the podcast, like the first book that I read that I really realized that like, oh my god, like you can love reading this much, was Harry Potter. Would you say yours was Lord of the Rings, or was there a book before that?
I'm not even a big Lord of the Rings guy, to be honest with you. I took the class because it seemed like something both lax and exciting.
Yes.
I mean, I might not be too much into lore, but learning about Tolkien and his experience in the Great War and how he translated that into writing was exciting.
Yeah.
Into fantasy really was exciting. But I would say, getting back to your question, in terms of what book first stood out to me, as a kid, of course, everybody read Harry Potter. Harry Potter was essential.
What's your Hogwarts house?
Well, my girlfriend thinks that I'm Ravenclaw.
I also think you're Ravenclaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
We're on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'd say probably as I started getting a little older, the book that made me interested in writing, or reinvigorated that, at least from when I was a kid, was a book in Spanish by Miguel de Unamuno, who was a golden age novelist from Spain. He wrote a little novella titled San Manuel Bueno Mártir, or Saint Manuel the Good Martyr. Saint Manuel the Good Martyr. And it's basically a book about, I don't want to give it away, but a priest, a parishioner, the head of the church, really, in a small town, who doesn't believe in the afterlife.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it's the whole novella is written in the perspective of one of the townspeople, petitioning why this priest, despite him not believing in the afterlife, should be canonized as a saint.
Wow, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great book. Highly recommend it. I don't know any good translations because I read it in Spanish.
Yeah.
But,
I'm taking beginning Spanish 1
really?
in the fall, so I'm not ready to read the book yet, but after that class I will read it. That actually sounds super interesting.
Very interesting. It was, I think, I mean, I went to a Catholic high school, and there were times that I had to question my faith because my parents got divorced, and when the institution doesn't work, you start to question, well, how do I make myself a bigger part of the faith? Does that make sense? Or reconnect myself. But the argument of that book was both insightful and just purely exciting to read, which really reinvigorated my interest in words and minutia, the syntax. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And especially like you read that in high school?
High school.
Yeah, during that during those like ages specifically, especially when you're going through a hard time, like I went through a similar experience, like when my parents got a divorce when I was in high school too. So I I ended up reading a book that really helped me.
What was the book?
It was called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It's like it's a memoir about this like 45-year-old like white woman who like is now like, I'm liberated and free, but at the time I was like, this is it.
I love that.
This is everything. And so like it's just those years specifically, like you're so you're so much more open to like being able to be like moved by stuff like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
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 I think that's so beautiful.
I think it's a great thing. I mean,
Me too.
as you start to get older, and you're part of trying to find your poetic voice or writer's voice for yourself in fiction, is starting not only to have likes but dislikes.
Yeah.
And that, I think, closes off a certain jovial or young aspect, an exciting aspect of reading, where you come in with no predisposed notions. So I completely agree with you on that.
No, yeah. Oh yeah, that's a really good point. When did you first realize that like poetry was the direction you kind of wanted to go in?
That's a great question. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's already obvious that you're a great interviewer. So
I've interviewed him 5 million times already because we're doing a documentary together for T. So this is very funny.
And I think that Ian plugged this, so I feel I have to equally plug this.
Yep.
This documentary Laura has been working on with Jenna.
Jenna.
Yes.
I miss her.
That's awesome. Yeah. Have you guys been keeping in touch and such?
Not kind of. Like we'll randomly like message each other, but she's in St. Pete for the summer.
Oh, so. That's cool.
Oh, I hope she watches this. I love Jenna.
Yeah. My mom is in St. Pete right now.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I wonder if they're hanging out.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be crazy. But point is, this documentary, you've been working on it for over almost a year now.
Almost a year, yeah.
And it's basically telling the whole story, the history of T Literary and Arts Magazine, when it was founded, who founded it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Be on the lookout for that. Yeah. Super fun times ahead. But yeah, Ollie's a great interviewer. He always, he has the best answers. Ian was, I think Ian actually said something about that.
Really?
I mean,
I watched it, but I didn't recall that.
Maybe it was like when we were like talking before, but he was like, I'm sure Ollie has the best answers. Like,
well, that's big shoes to fill there. Then.
Yeah. So when did you move into the direction of poetry? Yeah.
Okay. Getting back to the question. So I came in, I think that junior year, especially because of not the halotology professor, but certain professors who were really interested in literature. There was one that studied Spanish literature at the University of North Carolina. They were interested in both fiction and poetry, but I was more attracted to reading fiction at the time.
Yeah.
I think that might be a result of the educational system nowadays. It's not like in the 50s where you would be reading Chaucer all the way up to Auden. Nowadays, it's more about modern 20th century fiction. So, I mean, so many. The Great Gatsby.
I hate that book.
You hate that book.
I know it's a hot take. It's
really?
A really hot take. I do not
really
like
enjoyed that book.
I was so bored. I was like, this is the worst. This is the worst book. But that's neither here nor there.
But point is, I had read I think that you're influenced by what you read. And up to that point in my life, I had read overwhelmingly fiction.
Yeah.
So I came into UF expecting that I would write fiction.
Yeah.
I knew that somewhere in junior, senior year, I wanted to write. And so the immediate answer was I'm writing fiction. I took a workshop over the summer with, he was at the time a grad student. His name was Tim Shermer. Hopefully he's still writing out there. I haven't spoken to him in a while. But he was great. And I think I learned a lot from him regarding the essential concepts of writing fiction. But I realized, and I think that even the first piece that I had submitted as a part of the workshop, it was a microfiction piece, so like a flash fiction.
Those are hard.
They can be hard.
Yeah.
And I'm no Lydia Davis here, So I think it came out very well. The first thing that was said in the workshop was that this reads more like a poem than it does a prose piece.
Damn.
There's, I mean, they said it in a nice way,
Yeah.
and there's and it's poetic, which I don't like using that word because what does that mean? It can mean so many things nowadays.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah, but that it read more like a poem and maybe like a prose poem.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it was a good thing. I didn't really think much of it. I
Mhm.
continued with fiction, but I want to say I took also a workshop in poetry with another grad student the following semester.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm rambling. Am I rambling?
No.
Okay.
No,
great.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying because I also went down that path of taking all those different
Really?
workshops.
Okay. Yes. And then in the spring of my freshman year, this must have been when COVID was about to start.
Mhm. Oh, right.
Yeah.
I always forget we're in different grades and you experienced that.
Slightly different because you didn't have your prom.
Yeah, I was in high school.
Yeah.
Doing that. Yeah.
And I didn't have, well, while you didn't have a prom, I had an extended spring break, a year and a half long spring break.
Yeah.
So that was the difference, I think, between
Yeah.
how we.
Yeah.
But point is, I took a workshop with one of the core of the poetry faculty here, William Logan. He's been
Oh my
here the longest.
gosh, I've heard so much about him.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Mhm.
He is not only a great the essentials of what you need in a teacher, a great reader of literature, a great critic of literature. So in other words, he knows how to line edit and critique poems in a way that's useful to a new poet.
Mm-hmm.
But also he's a very good friend and a very good person.
Mm-hmm.
He cares about his students, and of course everybody that really likes a professor says that about the professor that they like.
Yeah.
But this William goes leagues beyond what I've seen other professors do.
Yeah.
You know, going and when you want to get into an MFA program, I mean, he met with me in coffee shops trying to revise 40-some poems to see which 10 we were going to submit for my manuscript.
I've heard that from a lot of people. Like people saying that like he's just all around a good guy.
I mean, generations of UF poets would not be in the position that they're in now had it not been for William's mentorship and insights. But the point is, when you meet somebody like that, it's very hard not to feel nurtured in a way that really fosters interest.
Yeah.
So I think that from that semester, not only did I realize that there was somebody here who was, I mean, he's vested in his poetry and his criticism, but he's also a very vested professor.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, hard to find. He's a very vested teacher. He loves teaching. It's something that really attracted him to, I'm sure, the job. And when you find something like that, or find a person like that, it really inspires you to keep going with whatever it is that they're mentoring you in life. It could be anything. Drag racing. You find a drag racer.
Yeah.
Anything, really.
Yeah.
Or it could even be an emotional build that you're trying to do. Learning how to do relationships with your therapist. Whatever the case is. But I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're not rambling. This is really good. No, you're doing great.
Okay, cool. But the point is, it's very inspiring seeing somebody like that that takes an interest in your work. And not to say that the fiction people, Camille is great. I've never met Akpan.
I took his class in the spring. He's amazing. And I'm taking him again in the fall. Yeah, he's great.
I hear great things. I always hear great things.
You would love him. He's so joyful.
I feel like maybe we've talked once in passing, but I can't say for sure because I mean I didn't take his class because by the time that I decided to make the switch, that was it. I made the switch.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But Camille was great, and the MFA teachers that I had were also great. The instructors. But I don't know. I think not only did I connect more with William and then later on Angie. I never took Hoffman.
Angie. Wait.
Malenko, Professor Malenko.
Okay, was she? Is she like young? Is she younger?
What do you
Because
mean?
I had a poetry. I did a. Oh wait, no, never mind. That was fiction.
Mm.
Yeah, different person. I was yeah. I was like, wait, what? Okay, yeah, continue.
Yes. Well, she's young at heart.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
And I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, not only was I felt very nurtured by these people, but I also felt, after writing fiction for a good amount of time, that my innate talents, because I mean, talents can be honed into skills. I'm sure that if I would have spent more time on fiction, I would be a better writer, a fiction writer now than I would have been a fiction writer in the past.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
I can't say that I would be a better fiction writer than I would be a poet if I had spent the same amount of dedication to the craft. It's like me saying that I would have been as good of a basketball player if I had spent the time that I did.
Yeah.
Writing poetry right now. It doesn't.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that.
Yeah, until like 13. You could ask my dad. He'll tell you.
That's hilarious.
Oh man, but the point is, I realized that the talents I already had were more geared towards short writing. I had always been very methodical about words, syntax. Not to say I don't think in paragraph form as well, or in chapter form. But what I realized is that after I started writing a couple of novellas, I started realizing that the structure in which I followed tended to be very methodical and repetitive. So chapter 1 would always be some form of characters meeting other characters, and why can't I just start in media res? But what might be a fault there in fiction, if adapted, could be a skill in poetry, and specifically formal poetry. Knowing how to use form, knowing how to use structure, and perfecting certain structures is a good thing. Whereas I think fiction works not necessarily always, but in a larger way than other forms, in novelty. Yeah,
definitely.
So, not to say that poetry isn't about being new and exciting. I was watching a documentary or not a documentary. I think it was an adaptation of his life, a movie, "Kill Your Darlings," about Allen Ginsberg with Daniel Radcliffe.
Love Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah. It was an interesting movie. I watched it last night, and of course the whole movie, since he's a part of the beat movement, is about breaking form. And his dad was also a poet, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
But quick introduction to Allen Ginsberg. Yes. Allen he was one of the most formative poets of the 20th century, though admittedly I can't say I've read much of his work. His father, I found out through the movie, was also a famous poet, and I think his name started with a W. Ginsberg, obviously that same last name. But the kid takes an affinity to poetry. He gets into Columbia to study. At that time, I don't even know if there's MFA programs, but there's still an academic interest in writing poetry. He drops out because he's very much about breaking the molds, and or at least that's how the movie portrays it. He dropped out for a number of other reasons, which I won't spoil here. But he was known for the Whitman-esque, that is, not caring about rhyme, meter, form.
That's
I mean,
awesome. I
how-
love poetry like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One of his most famous pieces, "How," is the opposite of what formless would enjoy.
Yeah.
But again, to bring it all back to the question that you asked, I realized my skills lied in a more traditional sense toward poetry,
hmm
and I think that that's why not only did I have good mentors, but yeah, I felt more inclined to it naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, like, we've both, I'm trying to get a dual degree in English now.
You should.
Because I was like, I'm taking all these writing classes anyways, might as well get the. But you graduated with an English degree, right?
I did.
So you obviously took a lot of those workshop classes.
Too many.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think it's so interesting because I've taken, I think I've taken like 3 or 4 fiction ones at this point, but I've taken 1 poetry one, and just it's interesting, like the different people in those in those classes. Like there really is a difference, and I'll admit I definitely fit in more with the fiction crowd. But it's funny because I could definitely see you thriving in a poetry environment. It's really hard to explain.
I don't know whether to take that as a compliment.
No. Take it as a compliment because I remember there was some people in my poetry workshop who like you could tell by the way that they wrote poems where it's like, oh, you want to write fiction, don't you? Like, you don't want to be writing poetry right now. And I don't know, like, very they were very literal, I guess. Yes. Yeah. I was like, you should not. And obviously I was the same way. I should not. I literally did so. I almost said, yeah, I did really bad at that class.
I started out like that too. Everybody does.
It was hard. And it's also hard too because with workshop, and I think me and Ian talked about this, but there's such kind of an emotional component to it because you're literally I mean, at least at UF, you basically write a couple of things a semester and then your whole class tears it apart and
yeah.
And so that can be an intense experience. How did you deal with that? When you were first starting that process at UF, how did you deal with that? How do you continue to deal with taking criticism in a workshop format?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think I'm sure that I'm stealing this from somebody. But they say that the great artists, good artists borrow and the best steal.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I also
you came up with that.
No, I did not. You see, I'm borrowing here. I don't want to be too great.
Yeah.
But I think that it's very difficult to make it as an artist in general. I'm talking about composing music, writing, drawing, painting, even graphic art, graphic design. It's very hard to make it as a creative if you don't develop a thick skin. Because it's almost impossible for everybody to like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever find yourself in that reality, perhaps that might be the moment that you question, well, maybe I should try something new.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I don't know for the rest of the world, but at least for me, the first person that I write for is myself. And I'm sure that you would say that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you want people to read your stuff.
Yeah, and be like, this is great.
Yeah, that's the hope,
Yeah.
But writing is a very inward task.
Especially poetry.
Well, fiction as well. I mean,
yeah.
It's not like nowadays, I mean, it might even be more so, because you'll see there's always been atmosphere of collaboration, an atmosphere of collaboration in poetry.
Mhm.
So like Wordsworth and I think it was Harding had written the very famous um, collection together, which is slipping my mind right now.
Mhm.
But that is one of the two of the five main romantics,
Mhm.
creating the centerpiece for what would be that era.
Mhm.
Right now, one of the magazines that I very much enjoy reading, Rattle, is doing an open casting call for poems written in collaboration. Translation of poetry has always been a collaborative work.
Mhm.
So people like Robert Bly, who had a grasp of Spanish, but I mean, I don't know him. I don't know his history, in other words.
Mhm.
But I don't think he was a native speaker. That is, I don't think it was his first language.
Mhm.
He would there's poems that I've read, great translations of Vallejo or of Garcia Lorca, which are translated with co-translators.
Yeah.
You don't see that in fiction.
Yeah.
You don't see that in fiction, I don't think. I mean,
Yeah.
have you seen that?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't, but yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, but getting back to the question of how do you deal with criticism? I think that it comes from realizing that before you're writing for anybody else, you're writing for yourself.
Mhm.
And maybe I have a slight edge on that theory, or on the being able to take criticism front, because I have a brother,
Mhm.
and I think that helps.
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that helps.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a little sister. So
Okay.
she is so good at humbling me.
Yeah.
She's so good at humbling me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. My brother just traveled to Europe, so he's living his fancy life.
Oh, so
Yes.
he's like, you Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's posting pictures of him with a cigarette, like the French, you know. Oh
That's
man.
funny.
But no, I mean, I grew up. I wasn't the sportiest kid. I think that my brother. I'm going in a roundabout way to get to the conclusion.
No, you're totally
Okay,
good.
great.
You're totally good. You're eating.
I wasn't the sportiest kid growing up,
Mhm.
but I really love sports, so I spent a lot of time practicing.
Mhm.
And I was the older brother, so and my brother's name is Chris. Christian is a little bit more athletic than I am.
Mhm.
But first off, we played for years, and I would be beating him multiple times a day.
Mhm.
Basketball outside in the little hoop that we had in the driveway.
Yeah.
But after a while, he started picking up on my moves. He started. He started getting taller.
Worst. That's the worst when you're a younger sibling. Oh.
And it becomes a fight. It becomes, and sometimes it will get heated. But
yeah.
But in that environment where you're constantly having to compete with somebody else,
Mhm.
You start to realize. Well, and also there's trash talking, and not just in. We would make a competition out of everything. I feel like.
Oh, totally. I relate to that. Yeah.
Everything. Throwing a little piece of paper in the trash can. Who can get it in there first?
Yeah.
You know? Random things. But
yeah.
with that comes an amount of, when I win, I'm better than you, or you're better than me, or you messed up on this.
Yeah.
You know. And a lifetime of that develops, I think, a thick skin, which in an indirect way translates to dealing with criticism as a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I'm an older sibling too.
I see.
And my sister's 2 years younger than me. How is Chris? How much younger is Chris?
19 now, so he's usually 3 to 4 years.
He's quite a bit younger. Yeah.
Most of the time 3.
Yeah, my sister's 18.
So okay, cool.
Yeah, she's just going into college.
Nice.
Yeah, she's
That's
excited.
awesome. Where's she headed?
She's going to FGCU.
Oh, that's
She just had her
school.
orientation yesterday, and she was so nervous. And she's deaf not watching this. I'm saying that she just not care.
That is my brother.
Yeah, she doesn't care. They don't care what we do, so we can talk whatever we want about
or
them.
maybe they'll watch it and then they won't say anything.
No, yeah.
Saying something is
they're
like
not going to
giving
give us
praise.
the satisfaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she having a sibling, I think, is so. And I never even thought about that in terms of taking criticism, but you're definitely right.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, right out of the womb, that girl has been, my biggest humbler. And I've definitely humbled her.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. It's very, I think it's super important. And especially, like, in workshop, too. Like, you're around all of these kids, like, your same age, and especially, I mean, at least for me, in poetry feels much more personal than fiction. But I don't know, because I feel like fiction, it's like kind of like you can make it much more, I don't know, broad, and there's so many different elements to it that, like, yeah, some of it might be personal, but it can be kind of hidden better. But poetry's kind of like, very, like, here it is. And especially, like, I can't, or at least for me, like, I can only write poems about, like, something I'm experiencing. I'm not good enough to, like, write about something that I don't fully understand or know about. But I remember the one poetry workshop I took.
Okay.
I wrote a poem, and it was like it was in a specific form. I can't remember what kind of poem it was called. I don't know. I'm so bad at remembering technical. But it was like one of the ones where it was like the second line repeats at the fourth line or whatever.
Okay.
Or, like, I don't know, something like that. And I wrote this poem. I had the biggest crush on this guy. And I think I wrote 8 poems in that class about him, I think, when I went and counted back the other day. And I was like, that's so embarrassing. First of all, so embarrassing.
He didn't know.
He didn't know. And he's definitely not watching this. And
oh God.
But I was like, there was one I wrote, and this kid who, definitely had beef with me for some reason.
Had beef with you?
Yes, I don't know why. He never liked my poems, which is fine. They were probably bad, but, like, and I also, like,
I doubt that.
He was very much like, he was like, this is a deep, like, he was like a metaphysical poet, and I was like a Taylor Swift lyric, which I love, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Great.
But not everyone respects the Taylor Swift grind, and that's fine. But he raised his hand and he went, so is this about a dog? What is this about? And I was like, no, this is not about a dog. What? Like, it was so, that's a humbling.
That was a diss.
It was a humbling experience.
That was a diss.
And it is so, like, it is hard to put your, true feelings on and have someone be like, is this about a dog that you're writing about? So something about, like, pacing. I was like, oh, it was awful, but it's hard. It's hard taking those classes and, like, putting yourself out there in that way. And it's just,
I get what you mean. I think that in fiction, at least in the current trends of fiction, it can be easier to veil yourself because you're dividing yourself within the multiple characters that you create.
Yeah.
In other words, you're not just the protagonist, you're also the antagonist, you're the sidekick, in some way or fashion, it all leads back to you, but you've divided yourself in some way.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I recall from when I was writing.
Yeah. No, you're totally right.
Yeah. And I think I also somewhat agree with you in terms of poetry. The modern tradition that we're seeing in the 21st century with poets like Ocean Vuong or Rowan Ricardo Phillips, Jericho Brown, all great, is more interpersonal, more focused on feeling, which might be a result of something of a turn in concepts in the 20th century. I'm reading Robert Bly now, which is why I keep going back to him, but he has this anthology of Spanish translations and his thoughts on them, called Leaping Poetry, which came out sometime in the 70s. And the basic concept that he was arguing for is the power of subconscious association. That is, rather than being methodical about what am I going to write about, letting your subconscious make the connections, make the metaphors between whatever the subject of the poem is, and whatever it sees fit to connect it with. That's what he found exciting about Spanish poetry, and he thought American poetry lacked.
Yeah. I can totally see that.
Yeah. But the basic idea of that, of tapping into subconscious, it kind of disallows the poet from writing something that is not personal, as you said.
Yeah.
Because the subconscious is Freudian. It's yourself. It's the it's the ego. It's every part of that self that you're allowing to roam free. I think that there are a lot of poets that also thrive not being personal. The people who are focused on history, I'm going to, well, one of my professors in Boston, his name is Carl Kirchway. I love his poetry. It's very much focused on Roman antiquity and history, which I'm also
cool.
a history person myself.
Yeah.
Not to say he doesn't dabble in the personal, and I think that every poem that somebody writes inevitably is going to be personal in some way because you're writing it. But that could be the same about fiction. But the point is, there are different avenues, different schools of thought that are emerging within the 21st century and that have existed and bled into from the 20th century. We might be in a... This is me speaking naively. I don't know, but they say that literature and history, someone moves in the pendulum. We might be in one of those transition phases into that new side of the pendulum. But I can't say which way that'll go.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Yeah. But to sum it up, fiction, yeah, you're hiding yourself in a way, but I think that both could be very personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on obviously like what you're writing, and I mean I love the fiction workshops because it's also I think for me personally it's more fun to hear people's fiction stories than their poetry. I don't know, I think it's really interesting to, because I feel like you get like, obviously you get more in the sense of like it's longer, so you get like I don't know, it's cool to get insight into like they're coming up with this whole story by themselves, like I don't know, it gives them kind of more insight into their personality and like what they've been through, and like I just think that's probably my favorite part about workshop is just, you know,
there's development.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And after not having flexed that muscle for a while, I had a class my final semester where I was required to write a historical fiction piece. It was for a history class.
Oh wow.
It was a great exercise. I thought it was fun.
Wait, that's cool.
Yeah. But I recently shared it with a friend because he insisted. And I think that, well, he told me, I asked him any criticisms, and he told me I was hoping for more, honestly. And I think that after having focused so much on scarcity in poetry, making that transition was like flexing an old muscle.
Definitely.
So you gotta keep on flexing it.
Yeah, that was definitely like a criticism my poetry teacher would always give, where it's like, do you really need this line? Like there's and I'm such a person, like in poetry too, I'm like, I love like lyrical, modern, you know, like long kind of poetry where it's like, I have a crush on you, but you know what I mean? Like,
yes, of course.
I don't know. And it might be obviously not, and it's not that dumb, but like
you might like Allen Ginsberg then.
I'll literally, oh my God, I'll look him up after this. But I wanted to know, is there any pieces that you would like to read of yours?
Sure, gladly.
Yay, I'm so excited.
I had brought a couple along.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I've never heard your poetry before.
Really?
This is so exciting.
Yeah, it should be fun. I brought in a few poems that I had written. Well, over the course of a few years.
Mhm.
Not to say that I've been working on these in specific over a few years, but
Mhm.
the compilation. I just brought 5. It's not too much. It'll just be a few.
Okay, awesome.
A few. But these were all, well, published in some fashion.
Mhm.
So I'll talk about that when I get there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, let's start with this one. So this one was published in Islandia Journal.
Mhm.
In another form. I think I've somewhat adapted it since then.
Mhm.
I can be a little bit manic about revising, which
Yeah.
is probably also why fiction wouldn't work for me anymore. Man,
Yeah.
there has to be a point where you say that's it. You know?
Yeah, you gotta quit at some point.
Yeah. But this one's called Mahi Season.
Mhm.
Juddering along the interstate, my 93 jalopy churns the flash flood. I watch ripples in nearby furrows. A farmhand in his youth, my grandfather distrusted the city, examining restaurant utensils as he would wild fruits. I think of him as I drive through Biscayne. Skipping school, some key rats fish by the hammocks. They chop off branches for the next cast. I had planned to play hooky, too, with that cashier girl from Tinky's, and take her to the abandoned marine stadium. We would have skipped glass shards across the water, imagining them into dying constellations. The little horse and the plow have built up in the basin. Cops have closed off the site. I barely recognize La Vaquita, bereft of its vandals, and pass like a tourist. Grandpa's old house has a new doormat. It's welcome home, spelled in a cursive, not sarcastic, but just so. Another curve, another loop, and I'd beg, where else can you go?
I love that.
Yeah, that one's very nice. I should have probably given a note, but for those of you that are not from Miami, key rats are what the locals call the young kids that live on Key Biscayne.
Oh.
Yes.
Wait, that's so cute. I love that.
It's very nice. I don't know if it's meant to be cute. It might be derogatory in some sense.
Wait, yeah.
I don't think so. I
Wait,
think
what's it called? Key rats?
key rats.
Oh,
Like,
I heard it. I was like, key rats.
You know how like there's gym rats?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same concept because you could always see the local kids. It's the one place in Miami where kids roam free. There's a certain safety and there's no kidnapping because the Key Biscayne is sectored off from from the rest of Miami. You have to go through a bridge and pay a toll.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it would be a little bit more difficult, I think, for that to happen over there.
Yeah.
It's very island time.
Yeah.
Is that even though it's a part of Greater Miami?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what a key rat is.
That's cool.
Yeah. This next one, I published sometime, or I had it published some time ago in I-70 review as an almost entirely different, well, not entirely different, but slightly different poem. And the original title was An Oasis. I have been working on or thinking of revising this for a while, and I think our meeting incentivized me to revise it.
Let's go.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So this is the revised version of. Well, I had revised it after the fact multiple times, but this is the revised version of the revised version, titled entirely differently. It's titled Cruising. buffed. My dinghy glistened like a pair of brogues, second hand, when a man skulked by in a sundress. Anglers cast snide nothings at her, him. They little care of which. For a barb, a worm is a worm. I too offered a sailboat ride, and he hid his lips as a snail does in salt. Ashamed, I sailed toward the mangroves, where I had my vision. A great egret escort, perched by a dim, deserted saloon. He turned, and I followed. S curved. He leaned in, locking eyes, and I didn't know if he'd bite my lips or kiss them. I'd have paid him either way.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
I love the ending.
The ending stayed the same, but certain things changed. I think the original was a woman, but I recently watched, like I said, the movie about Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah.
And he was one of the first openly gay poets
Mhm.
in the States. And the movie is about basically his best friend is accused of killing this guy. The friend's name is Lucian. This is all based on a real story, by the way.
Wow. That's crazy.
And Lucian was accused of killing a homosexual whose name was David or Daniel.
Mhm.
I don't want to spoil it for those of you that are gonna watch it. It's free on I don't know if it's Tubi TV or one of those Roku TV.
Yeah, like one of
the ones where you have to watch the commercials.
It's like Peacock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is, Lucian is also gay, but he struggles with that sexuality, and so that's where the concept of this came in.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not gonna spoil it. Watch the movie, or at least look it up. It's a very interesting story.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. So this next one, I've read elsewhere, and I wrote it as a part of my residency at the Hunter Museum of Art last year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was great. William's wife, Deborah Greger, she had been running the program for multiple years as the head poet in residence. I mean, she taught me a lot, and really cared for, I think, the museum.
Yeah.
And also the sparse students that she would have throughout the years.
Yeah.
So it was really nice. But one of the things that she really enjoyed was, if you've ever been to the Harn, the rock garden.
Yes.
It's lovely. I don't think that they have a horticulturalist right now who's raking the rocks, because before it used to be, I forget his name, but he had been there for multiple years and was very interested in Zen and rock gardens in general. But he had been raking the rocks into the. For those of you that don't know what a rock garden is, it's basically like a well, it's a garden sans garden. It's basically all rocks.
Yeah.
But the concept is that you are to go, and usually they have like typically they have a bench adjacent to the garden. You're not supposed to walk into the garden. The one in the Harn has a walkway, which is unique, but in a traditional sense, you don't walk in. You're supposed to look out onto the scene, and the rake patterns incentivize or not incentivize, but are supposed to facilitate a meditative state. And over the years in Japanese culture, those rake patterns have come to mean certain symbols that equate to peace or love or whatever the case may be. But as a viewer, the hope of going to visit a rock garden is just to sit down and feel at peace
Mhm.
which I think is something that's hard to find nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree
Um,
with that.
So hopefully they'll get a new horticulturalist. They usually have one every semester since the gentleman's passing. That comes in, somebody that works at the agricultural departments at UF or is a student, that'll do the raking on their behalf. But since it's the summer, students are gone. I'm sure that they'll do it again in the following semester. If you do plan on going, try to go when they have that horticulturalist. If not, the idea is still there. It's very peaceful. And then the one at the Harn also overlooks. This might only be useful to, I just realized, to the people watching this in Gainesville.
I think that's most people who watch this, I think, are in Gainesville.
Perfect.
So you're good. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Target audience.
So yes, target audience. So another great thing about that rock garden is it has a glass. Usually it's just a wall, but this one has a glass pane that overlooks the university itself. So it overlooks Southwest, which is in the distance, but more importantly, you know how there's all those volleyball fields and the soccer fields, and it really is great. It's so nice to take in the scenery, and you're literally there by yourself. The point is, to get back to the poem, I wrote this during that residency, and somewhat because of Deborah's affinity for the rock garden, and I started to enjoy it too. So obviously, since it was written as a part of the residency there, it's after a certain piece. It's after Nostalgia 0701P, which is a sculpture by Osamu Koshima, which is on display right now at the Harn if you're interested in the contemporary collection. And then this poem was published in the Ekphrastic Review a few months back. Two butterflies. The rock garden reminded my mother that thirst is a perennial stream. Waves raked in the gravel years ago or yesterday. The boulders preserved no memory of our motel room. The day's water cut at noon. My mother warming on the stove a pail's worth to bathe me. Instead, the standing stones fossilized a butterfly, like the one I imagined when my mother made a metaphor of divorce. She was a great purple. My father, a lizard too heavy to lift over a river. My mother had assured herself that there were plenty lizards, rivers, and all too pert butterflies, one of which escaped the allegory, flapping its way to the rock garden. As if in a courtship display, the butterfly's scabrous suitors extended their gorgets. She, in fear, her wings. From what earthen pore, like these lizards, had dalliance reared itself? My mother simpered at her new boyfriend. He could not yet leave the rock garden and its arid nature, nor I his. That night, in the motel room, he'd rinse off, in our last ration of water, the butterfly waiting for dew to pool in the rake's trail.
That one might be my fave so far.
Yeah?
I like that one.
Oh,
yeah, that's interesting.
It's very. I'm telling you, the setting is conducive to, as we were talking about, tapping into that unconscious in a way that it already implies association. We're talking about things that should be inherently different, rocks and waves that are there. It's raking patterns looking like waves in the rocks.
Yeah.
That sort of association just in the natural world, I think, brings good associations to the subconscious.
Yeah.
So this poem was originally published in Rattle, which is the literary magazine I had mentioned before, and it came after I read this New York Times piece on the dolphins in Laguna, Brazil, where they have I think the term is symbiotic relationship, or a relationship in which both species benefit.
Oh, mutualism?
Might be mutualism.
Yeah.
Again, not a science person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the one scientific concept I memorized in school.
Got it.
Yeah.
So then mutualism. They have a mutualistic relationship with humans, whereby for centuries it's been happening. The fishermen in this small town stand by the shore, really. Maybe they wade in a little bit, so quayside, and they have these large nets, and on, let's say, 30 yards out, there are dolphins who basically herd in the carp to where they know the fishermen are. And so they herd in the carp as a team. Obviously they're working as, I don't even know what you would call a group of dolphins. I feel like herd is not the right word.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But point is, they start to push all the carp toward the fishermen, and then in order to signal, I mean, the fishermen can't see, the water is very dark. In order to signal to the fishermen when they should cast their nets, they make a clicking sound with their I don't even know what you would call that. They make a clicking sound.
Yeah.
Point is, which travels through the waves, and the fishermen swear by this. This has been happening for generations, mind you. Generations of fishermen and their sons and their sons. They swear they have learned to feel the vibration of the click on their heels, on their shins.
Wow.
And from that, they know when to cast it. It's basically the dolphins saying, cast the net now. So they cast the net, they catch a whole bunch of carp, and as a reward for the dolphins, they give some to the dolphins. Basically, the dolphins come in and they nibble through the holes of the net, the trapped carp. They take their share.
That's cool.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But that's where this came from.
Okay.
All right. And the title is in Portuguese. Samba de sua terra. Light as swash, her soles left no trace in the sand. Sandals pelagic like caravels. She had tossed hers to the sea, as if they had always belonged there, sailing on their cloth straps, and she here, barefoot, teaching samba. She spread her sarong from luff to leech, and, laying it by my feet, said that I was not dancing if it puckered at my heels. I wasn't dancing. We tuned the radio to a Portuguese station, the host speaking too quickly for me. Listening, my instructor confessed that she missed being a fisherman's daughter, and how wrong she was to dream of what lay beyond Laguna. Saudade, like dolphin clicks, felt against the shin with no net to cast.
I love that. I love the story behind it so much.
Yeah, it's a great story. And then for those of you, I'm a novice in Portuguese myself, but saudade is it's a term that the Portuguese specifically use, not the Brazil, not the Portuguese, the Brazilians specifically use in contrast to Portuguese, to signify something about the national sentiment, something about the human identity of Brazilians in specific, where they feel that by having separated from Portugal and existing as its own world, they feel separated from a part of themselves, and there's a certain somberness that's associated with that in the human condition.
That's beautiful.
So that's there's no real word for that in English. But,
yeah. Wow, that's lovely.
And this one's the last one I got. This one was published in JMWW, which is an online literary magazine that I also enjoy. Let's see, is there anything that you might need to know? I think this one stands on its own. Okay. This one's called Terminalia. Well, maybe I should explain what Terminalia is.
Yeah.
Okay. Terminalia was a Roman festival in honor of the Greek god Terminus, who, or maybe it's Terminalius. I'm forgetting the terminology, and if Kirchway ever sees this, he'll be upset. But the point is, Terminalia was this annual festival in which, if you've ever read, well, for those of you that have read Robert Frost's Mending Wall, it's a poem about two neighbors who, at the beginning of the spring season, they have to come together annually to remend the rock wall that separates their territories, because over the winter the water condenses and expands as ice within the rocks, making them topple. Basically, Terminalia was the same concept, where it wasn't about, well, it was partially about fixing divides between territories, but more so than that, it was about fixing the marks, the termini, the terminus, which even to this day mark, they're basically piles of stones most of the time. Sometimes there'll be statues or busts that mark steps within a path. So let's say a pilgrimage, or a common path to the market. The way you know that you're going the right way is every few miles you see a terminus.
Oh.
Yeah.
Neat.
And so it was a day of festival to that god, but also of ensuring that those structures, which are essential, are mended and upkept.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has some things to do with the poem. So we'll see.
Okay. Awesome.
Terminalia at the train station. There remains no narrative arc here. No arc among the Gothic besides the Gothic. Arches adorn the heads of door frames, like half garlands. If rain followed the plow, how was the east rusted over? Old friends, those dim robber barons, accrued their gains as bears and bulls before casting the tracks. They'd no need for metamorphoses. Ask a friend's bust what it recalls of the Bronx, though, and it will name its canal Leith, the fish flailing atop its concrete banks, dryads. Only squirrels, immortal beasts, pay homage to the lost station, stacking stones into piles like Romans, to mark their cachets.
I love that one. Yeah.
Squirrels
That's
actually
really
do
interesting. Really?
that. Yeah.
No way.
The way that they know where they've stashed their winter provisions
Yeah.
is by putting, most of the time, pebbles over the stash.
Aww.
But the thing is that other squirrels know that too, and so they're constantly, let's say it's a squirrel's own stash, he's constantly having to re-dig it out, move it somewhere else, dig it up, put the rocks, and then but somebody else will know that the rocks are there. It's a constant
Squirrel lore.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my god. Wait, that's adorable. I love that.
But yeah, those are the 5. I'm really grateful that you had me read them.
Oh my god, I loved all of them so much. I think my favorite was the 3rd one. Which one was the third? Let me see. Yes,
Two
that was my favorite.
butterflies. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was my favorite one. I loved all of them though. Those were so good.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on here and talking
to
me.
Of course.
I think of you as the god of the literary arts.
That is not
true. You know,
that is not true.
It's been an honor.
That's Terminus, not me. Yeah.
Terminus. Do you have anything else to say to the podcast? Any final words? Anything you want to plug?
Well, if you stuck around this long, thank you for watching. I would like to say thank you to everybody that's helped me along the way. My professors, as I've already mentioned, my parents, my brother,
yes,
for making
Chris.
me thick-skinned,
Mm-hmm.
and for you for having me on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm very grateful you didn't make it into the NBA, so you could make it here
Yeah.
today. We could have this awesome
I would
podcast.
still be here.
That's so funny.
Oh god.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back every Friday. So yeah. All right. Make sure you go read all of Ali's poetry. Look him up online. I'll put his Instagram
That'd
here
be very
too.
kind. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So thank you guys for watching. Bye.
Yes. Alrighty.